So I watched the new Rose of Versailles movie and I have some feelings. I didn't think I would make a video about this. I thought that I would only watch it, leave a review on Letterboxd and then never watch it again. But this movie has been circulating around my brain ever since I watched it, so I feel like I need to make a review about it. So I am starting with saying that I am, I guess, happy that they tried, but it wasn't a good attempt. Okay, so for anyone unaware that has no idea what Rose of Versailles is and still are watching this video, Rose of Versailles is about a girl who, when she was born, her father was disappointed that he got yet another daughter, but then he decides that he's gonna raise her as a son, and thus names her Oscar. And Oscar later becomes a royal guard for Marie Antoinette in the French palace. And Marie Antoinette was apparently, at first, planned on being the main character, but then the readers of the manga thought that Oscar was much more cooler, so they kind of like changed the main character. And it's so wild to me. Like, imagine you have this super nice peak gender OC and you want to focus on Marie Antoinette. It was incredibly popular for its time. Especially in parts of Europe, very especially Italy, I have noticed. Literally every Italian girl that I have met have like admitted to having a bisexual awakening due to Oscar. Even Lodovica Comello, who was an actress in my preteen obsession show Violetta, even she referenced Lady Oscar at one point. And even like got a cool sweater with Lady Oscar on it, and I was like, oh my god, an actress from my middle school obsession show referenced an anime that I have seen in later years. The anime even got several different theme songs depending on which country it was, because the original Japanese theme song from the original anime is pretty like melancholy but sweet. Italy took this and was like, this is a kid show, so we're gonna do this. Oh, lady, Oscar, and of course, because it takes place in France, it got a French dub. Although it's not always that an anime that takes place in a certain country gets dubbed in that country. I have mentioned before that there's an anime that takes place in Finland and never ever was broadcast in Finland and never ever dubbed. And I actually checked that anime out and it wasn't very good. So I get why they weren't that interested to broadcast it. But there's also the very, very famous anime Candy Candy that takes place in America, but, you know, never had an English dub. But anyway, the French people got a French dub of the anime that takes place in France, and it sounds a bit like an uphill battle song. Lady Oscar, and then the German theme song sounds like a Eurovision entry from the 80s. Lady Oscar, I'm a bit jealous that they got like cool new theme song, because you know what Sweden did when we got Lady Oscar? First of all, we didn't even get to air it on TV, because, quick history, Sweden in the 80s were very strict with what they showed on TV. So people weren't super exposed to other cultures, but there was one man who had been in Japan and saw this cool anime thing and he wanted to bring it to Sweden, and they were like, okay, but we're not gonna air it on TV. So he basically got a little team of like 4 people, dubbed a bunch of animes and released them on VHS. And as they started to release them in Sweden, they simultaneously started to release them in the other Nordic countries too. And that's basically how Nordic kids got exposed to animes back in the 80s. They got them on VHSs. So like, if you didn't have Lady Oscar on a VHS, you wouldn't know that it existed. But I got my hand on my VHS of Lady Oscar, and we didn't get a brand new theme song. We got the Japanese theme song instrumental. Oh my god, de har ingen... Det är instrumental, jag dör. But I mean, better than nothing. I originally watched the series in Japanese with subtitles because a friend of mine had shown funny screenshots from it, and I was like, okay, I'm going to watch this show because it seems funny. It wasn't that funny because it's pretty grim. I mean, it takes place during the French Revolution, but it was also pretty fun and entertaining at times. That being said, Rose of Versailles or Lady Oscar, depending on your preference, is not my favorite work of Ryoko Ikeda. My favorite work of hers is Onisama-e, or Dear Brother. And I kind of feel appealed that they should make an Onisama-e movie just to introduce it to a new audience. But considering what they did in this movie, I'm also extremely afraid what they're going to do in a potential Onisama-e movie. And it was like sort of the same with this. Because in theory, I was like, oh yay, a new version of Rose of Versailles. With better animation and a reintroduction to the characters. That sounds really fun. And then they did this. Okay, so I've babbled for way too long, so let's just get right into what happens in this movie. Well, let me say right off the bat that I think this is too large of story to tell in a movie. I do know that there exists a live-action version of Lady Oscar. I really need to see it sometime. Apparently, according to my friend who has watched it, the guy who made that live-action movie really hated the character Andre. So he made some changes to the characters. This movie has a lot of time skips, just so it can tell the whole story quickly. One thing to note about right away is that I mentioned how the original theme song in Japanese in the old anime was pretty melancholy, pretty somber. This one is super upbeat and it really feels like an anime OP. May our souls bloom in love, so will we as we. Where they even include characters that like barely have any sort of character in the story. Some of them only appear for one scene. Oh yeah, also, this new movie has a bunch of song numbers, and the thing is, not all of them are fully fleshed musicals. I would say that a lot of them are just music videos. Several people have already made this joke, but it feels like someone wanted to make AMVs of Lady Oscar, and then they just stitched a movie together around those AMVs. There is one like legitimate musical number where the characters actually sing, and it's like at the end of the movie when they're about to start the French Revolution. But it's so funny that they have the musical numbers to like that guy leading the revolution, because he's barely in the movie otherwise. Apparently this movie follows the manga more closely than what the original anime did, and that might explain why the first half randomly focuses so much on Marie Antoinette and then barely at all, because then they focus all of their time on Oscar. It makes it feel a bit messy. I think this movie also heavily relies that you just know about these characters since beforehand, because the first time I watched this movie, it was with two of my friends, and none of them have seen anything about Lady Oscar before. So before we watched the new movie, I thought it was fun that we could see my Swedish dubbed VHS tape that had the two first episodes. Kind of like, we're gonna start with the old one with some ugly animation and funny dialogue, and then we're going to the new cool animation in Japanese. And let me tell you, it was really good that they saw the old one first, because then they had some like exposition about who Oscar is, and her deal, and her character, and her relationships. Because this movie does not even explain why Oscar is named Oscar. We don't see a scene of her birth where her father is tired that he got another daughter, so he decides that you're gonna be my son instead. We don't get to see how she gets picked to be the royal guard for Marie Antoinette and feeling mixed emotions about that. No, the first scene is just Marie Antoinette arriving in France and seeing Lady Oscar and being like, ooh, that woman is pretty. And then they barely give any backstory to Oscar. Also, by the way, several people were tricked that this would be some sort of like toxic jury drama between Marie Antoinette and Lady Oscar. And I need to tell you right off the bat that The original anime from 1979 was way gayer than this was. They want to make it very clear that everyone is straight. Okay, Oscar is an enigma in herself. Like, it's hard to really determine her sexuality. I thought it was hard to determine in the 70s anime too. And we will get in with that a bit later. The weird thing with the movie is that it's both fast-paced and really slow-paced at the same time. Because you feel like they skip over so much. They do time jumps in these AMVs, so we see Marie Antoinette grow older and older, and they just make small references of things that happen in the manga or the show in these small clips. But the problem with this is sometimes they're really confusing, because there's one point where Oscar dresses up in a dress and dances with Axel von Fersen. And then there's a whole AV where she just runs away and cries, and then it cuts to Marie Antoinette singing about it. And I am just so confused, because they don't give an explanation to why Oscar is in a dress, they don't give an explanation to why she dances with Axel von Fersen, they don't give an explanation to what happened at the ball that they were on. We're left with so many questions, and the movie does not explain it at all. Axel von Fersen is a very interesting character too. It is in a way weird to say he's a character considering he was a real person, but when I'm talking about him and Marie Antoinette and King Louis XVI, just know that in this universe, just know that I'm not talking about them as real people, I'm talking about them how they are portrayed as anime characters in this anime. He really comes and goes, and we barely see any sort of chemistry really building up between him and Marie Antoinette. They just see each other, and then he leaves, and then 5 minutes later he's like, it's been 4 years, I'm back. And I'm like, you just left. Like, I haven't had the time to really miss you. There is an English dub to this new movie. They never did an English dub for the old anime series, but they have done a dub for this movie. And apparently they have also dubbed the songs. And I'm pretty scared, because if they sound anything like the English dubbed song of Violetta, then I don't want to hear it. I wish we got way more backstory for Oscar, because like, we know about Marie Antoinette, we know her, we have read all about her in history class, but this cool OC, we want to know her backstory. And the only backstory we get for her is that she was apparently only 11 years old when she got applied the post of the royal guard for Marie Antoinette. And that's wild to me. Okay, she and Marie Antoinette did not meet until they were 14, but imagine if they had already met when they were 11. They would practically be playmates more than a guard and a princess. Imagine like 11-year-old Marie Antoinette wanting Oscar to come in to her room and have a sleepover with her. At the same time, I guess it was good that the first half was like all about Marie Antoinette, because then we get nothing about her. For the rest of the movie, practically, she's just chilling in her castle with her husband and her kids, and spending the money that the peasants of France is giving the royalty. And this is a good way to make us not sympathize with her at all. So Oscar's best friend is named Andre, and she's practically known him since she was very little. And he's basically been obsessed with her his whole life. But she explicitly says that she sees him only as a brother. But they aren't that good with showing their chemistry. The two first episodes of the 70s anime establishes their relationship really well.
Minns du? Vi höll på att drunkna här en gång.
Det glömmer jag aldrig. Du var 6 och jag var 5.
Vi badar aldrig numera.
I wish we got some sort of backstory with that. Like, we only got one brief backstory where Andre just watched little Oscar go downstairs and was like, oh my god, I was enamored with you from the moment I saw you. But maybe we could have shown some like really vulnerable scene, like maybe show the scene where they almost drowned when they were 5 and 6. to like show how much they mean to each other. There's a part in the movie where Oscar's father wants to marry her off to a guy, and she doesn't want to marry him. Just because he wants someone to carry the family name forward, and he only has daughters, so you know, a man has to marry one of his daughters so they can take over the surname that way. But here's the thing, he has other daughters, so like one of their husbands can technically just take the daughter's last name like that. He could arrange it that way, you know. However, because we never saw Oscar's birth in this film, thus also not knowing why she was named Oscar and stuff, they haven't established that Oscar does have siblings, several of them in fact. We don't see them except for her birth scene, but like, and I guess most of them are like married off, but if her father really wanted to save the family name, then one of his daughters, he could have asked one of his daughter's husbands to change his surname to theirs. It doesn't have to be Oscar, you know. Anyway, Andre is kind of insane and tries to poison Oscar in a scene, and he stops himself, realizing that he doesn't want to kill her because that's just too far. But Oscar's like, oh shit, maybe he's gonna kill himself if I marry another guy. So she goes to her suitor and she's like, let's call off the wedding because there's a guy who I know would be super unhappy if I married you, and I would be unhappy if he was unhappy. And her suitor's like, oh, is it Andre? Do you love Andre? And she's like, I don't know, he's kind of like my brother, but like, I guess. And then the revolution starts, and Oscar abdicates from being a royal guard for Marie Antoinette and decided to be on the revolution side. And I guess she's kind of like, I don't want to die a virgin. So because Andre happens to live in the same house as her, she's like, okay Andre, let's have sex. So they do. It isn't until like the last part of the movie when some actions happen, when it actually feels like a real Rose of Versailles movie. I watched this movie twice in one day. First time with my two friends who never had seen anything about the Rose of Versailles or Lady Oscar before. And the second time with my friends who has watched the entire anime and also read the entire manga, I think. And during my second watch, she kept asking me how long of this movie is left. And I realized this movie is so long, and yet they skip over so many things that could have been essential. It isn't until like the last 20 minutes when some action happens, when they have a revolution, when people fight. All the movie beforehand is just exposition and AMVs that are so confusing sometimes and don't really say much. This is kind of like It Chapter 2. It Chapter 2 is 3 hours long, and yet they don't spend that much time on anything because apparently they don't have time to explain some stuff. And it's the same thing here. They have 2 hours and they don't have time to explain some stuff, and yet they have plenty of time to have a bunch of AMVs. And I'm not saying that the AMVs are bad, they are really nicely animated, they are really nicely sung too, and I really hope that the animators got paid well, but they focus so much more on aesthetics than on the plot. And they kind of expect you to just know these characters beforehand. I have been asking myself, who is this movie for? It's not really for new fans who haven't seen or read anything beforehand about this franchise. Because as proven by my two friends who didn't know anything, if we hadn't seen the 2 first episodes of the 70s anime, they would have been totally lost. So is it for the fans? I guess so, because it really relies on that you just know stuff beforehand. Like, I know why Oscar is named Oscar, but I also would have appreciated it if you explained it to me again, because not everyone will know. Also, Rosalie only got 1 single scene, and it got me a little mad. One person on Letterboxd summarized it very well. They say that this movie is for Japanese 60-year-olds that shipped Oscar and Andre in their youth and now gets to see them have a romantic relationship. And I think that might be accurate. Anyway, this movie was a total mess, and I had hoped that they made it a bit differently than what they did. Animation was super good, the songs were okay, but if you wanted to make AMVs about the Rose of Versailles, then just do the AMVs, we don't have to have a full movie about it. Did you watch the movie? And in that case, leave a comment and tell me what you think. And I'll see you next time. Goodbye.